Hi guys, Brad Alexander here again from Acuity Trading in London. Okay, today we're going to take a look back a few weeks and a few months at sterling and how big news has affected the pound. Let's start by looking back at Friday, the 19th of February earlier this year. If you had any long positions open on cable or were perhaps short on euro pound, you were probably reasonably happy. A great way to start the weekend, isn't it? Well, let's hope you close those trades as, unbeknownst to you, Boris Johnson was going to stand in front of his North London house on Sunday and give us his views on Brexit. As we all know, the markets are closed on Sunday until the banks in Auckland, New Zealand open for business. The rest is history. If you've been trading for any length of time, you've witnessed a weekend gap. This was a good one, with pound dollar gapping roughly equal to its normal daily range and pound Swiss gapping almost double its daily ATR. Let's quickly take a look at another example. We all remember 2 years ago when we were being bombarded by poll results regarding the Scottish referendum. For the most part, the no's were winning. Suddenly, a yes positive poll came out over the weekend, 2 weeks before the vote. Again, the news impacted the pound and we witnessed a weekend gap of 163 pips. If you were short cable, that was most likely an early Christmas present. Of course, the no's triumphed on the day and the pound temporarily gained strength. So, what's the point, you're asking? We all know that confidence drives price and that news is the conduit for that confidence. The point is, if you're trading pound dollar or any sterling cross, beware of the Brexit referendum the 23rd of June this year, or any of the surprise polls between now and then. Okay, you may remember on Monday when I mentioned Tesco's earnings report for Wednesday. Well, the results were good and Tesco's share price shot up. However, at the time I was very curious why our news sentiment radial gauge was showing bearish. My concerns were put to rest yesterday when the price crashed. If we look at our sentiment complex on Tesco, we see that big drops in news sentiment are often followed by price in a few days. As well, we can see here that sentiment has been well below average for a while. This is not the first time we've seen reversals after corporate earnings reports, and news sentiment is a valuable tool for trading it. Nicely, our daily market alerts picked up both these moves before the market openings. One last thing. We've spotted what could be a possible on gold on the daily charts. It's up to your discretion and experience whether this is a head and shoulders pattern or a pennant. Anyway, let's keep an eye on this one as news sentiment shows slightly bearish. Okay, that's enough for now. Have a good weekend. I'll be back on Monday morning to look at the week ahead.
Hello. Recently, Thunderfoot, someone who I admire a great deal, uploaded a video stating his case for Britain remaining part of the European Union. It's called Everything You Need to Know About the Brexit, and if you haven't seen it yet, there's a link here. Thunderfoot made a lot of considered and heartfelt points, some of which I agree with, some of which I don't, and even though there are many issues I'd like to discuss, I want to keep this short, because, in particular, there is one very good reason why Britain must leave the European Union. First of all, believe it or not, I am pro-Europe. I believe European unity is a very good thing, economically, culturally, diplomatically. To some extent, it seems to me that many Britons have failed to take advantage of what Europe can offer. And there's forever a sense that, to quote Churchill, we are with Europe, but not of it. I think that attitude is not necessarily desirable or healthy. Yes, there are a lot of problems with the European Union. For starters, in the short and medium term, until there is some semblance of economic and social parity between EU member countries. And yes, I do realise that phrase does sound a little bit Soviet. It's insane that any member country, Britain or any other, can't temper the flow of intra-European migrants to a level they can handle comfortably and responsibly. And, yes, there are risks and uncertainties involved in Britain leaving the EU. These have been discussed ad nauseum elsewhere, and I hate that sort of hand-waving normally, but we've all seen and heard the arguments. But from Thunderfoot's point of view, I can see why he would be extremely concerned about the fact that a lot of funding for scientific and medical research, and the arts too, is tied up to the European Union. This is a serious concern, but particularly from the scientific community's point of view, it's a problem that can be resolved by negotiation. And yes, membership of the European Union is expensive. But, per capita, it's not really the end of the world. Having said that, I do believe that economically, Britain can be better off negotiating its own trade agreements as it deems fit. But the promises of some of the Brexit voices of a modern-day British economic miracle are clearly unrealistic. As Thunderfoot mentioned, just like every other democracy on the planet, we do have a rather inglorious history of voting idiots into power. If we want it, though, Brexit can be not about crouching together on our little island and becoming more insular, but it can be about standing tall and turning around and facing the world. But here's the real problem, and the reason why we must vote to leave the EU. Before you turn off, yes, we are talking about the issue of sovereignty. It's what is rather too politely referred to as the EU's democratic deficit. The EU is unacceptably flawed from a constitutional level down. Since the Treaty of Lisbon came into force, executive power is held by the European Commission. They hold the power to propose legislation and are able to impose their will on every EU citizen despite the EU Parliament. They are unelected, they are insufficiently accountable, and they are insufficiently transparent. That's just problem number one. This is still a relatively young institution, and look at how corrupted it's become. The people of Europe deserve better. Now, as we all know, Britain's democracy is not perfect, but at least at every general election, we have the opportunity to replace the government, change the direction of the country if we want, and as a people, we have the ability to look our representatives in the eye. There is no such possibility with the powers that be in the European Union. Is the answer for Britain to stay in the EU and attempt to reform it from within? Well, yes, that was my opinion for many years. But despite various EU notables occasionally making noises about becoming more accountable, or paying more attention to the will of the people, or even instituting constitutional reform, I, for one, am now completely satisfied and totally convinced that there is no genuine desire or willingness for reform within the powers that be in the European Union. I am all for a European Union, but the European Union is not fit for purpose. I've already sent in my postal vote, and I voted to leave. My vote wasn't a vote against Europe, it was a vote of no confidence in the European Union to ever willingly reform itself. Our democratic and constitutional rights are precious. They didn't come cheap, they were paid for, in full, by blood, through the first half of the 20th century, through Magna Carta of 1215 and further back. We hold them in trust for our children, as they will for theirs. We don't own them, and we have no right to give them away. It is my fondest hope that if Britain leaves, it sets off a chain of events that eventually causes the EU's collapse. Perhaps then a new union can be built, deserving of the people it represents. Thunderfoot raised the spectre of the Second World War and warned of the consequences of a fractured Europe. Well, we are already at war. But there are no opposing armies and no uniforms. We're at war against an old foe, creeping authoritarianism, coming from government policy, from certain sections of society, and religious influence. As proponents of individual freedom and reason, we must be victorious. Britain leaving the EU is not going to win this war. Perhaps the war can never be won. But it can be a significant step. The referendum is a very rare opportunity, and we mustn't squander it. Please, every vote counts. I urge you to vote to leave the European Union.